Finally here, Al writes in, what are your thoughts on Extreme Championship Wrestling back in the day as compared to Vince McMahon's ECW? Because I've heard so much about ECW when it was introduced to the world of wrestling, and it was like nothing I've ever seen before. Even though they brought us great wrestlers like Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, and others, it was always about its hardcore lifestyle, tables, kendo sticks, crucifixions, catfights, and dropping women on their heads. And then they ran out of business, they were reincarnated by Vince McMahon, and then died. So, how do you view the legacy of ECW? Did it hurt the wrestling business? This is a loaded question. Did it hurt the wrestling business? Yes and no. And just to back up a little bit here, ECW was not about tables and crucifixion. They did one crucifixion angle, and that same night, they sent Raven back out there as Scott Levy to apologize to the crowd because they realized that they fucked up. And that was the night Kurt Angle was actually there. And Kurt Angle was so offended by that angle, he walked out. But that shouldn't be the legacy of ECW. It's part of the legacy, yeah, the hardcore style, the blood, the brawling, and all that kind of stuff. And yes, they did beat up a number of women and pile drive a number of women in ECW. But the thing that I look back on ECW, what I think it'll be remembered most for, part of its legacy, and to go to your question, did it hurt the wrestling business? It hurt the wrestling business because WWE and WCW felt like they had to compete with that style of wrestling as it became more popular. And when WWE started copying ECW, and they were the first, and no matter what Vince McMahon may say, they copied off of ECW. That you go back and watch the product late 96 into 97, and ironically, that fall of 96 period is when they started working with ECW. There was a little talent exchange. They had an agreement. They did some angles on Raw and on some of the pay-per-views with ECW guys. That's when the style started to change a little bit. Tables became more prevalent and that sort of thing, and the chair shots and all that kind of stuff. For that reason, yeah, ECW was bad news for the wrestling business because all of a sudden the violence factor got ratcheted way up. Everybody felt like they had to do that to compete. And looking back on it, and the chair shots to the head and all that kind of stuff, that was definitely part of the ECW influence, and that was not good. But I think ECW was equally good for the wrestling business because look at all the people who got a shot in ECW who would never have gotten a shot anywhere else. Look at Steve Austin. Look at Steve Austin. Look at Rey Mysterio. Paul Heyman brought some of these guys over to the United States for the first time. Chris Jericho. Benoit. Eddie. Malenko. I know there's other guys I'm just forgetting them off the top of my head. Those are the big names that jump to mind right away. These are guys that never would have gotten noticed or never would have been given a shot. Paul Heyman gave them a shot. He brought them in. And he got them over, or at least he gave them a chance to get themselves over, like with Austin. And that opened up a lot of people's eyes. And from ECW, guys went to WWE, guys went to WCW. So I think you can't really paint with a broad brush. You can't say ECW was bad for wrestling. You can't say it was good. It was a little bit of both. Goes both ways. That's the legacy I think that they left. They left a legacy of really great wrestling and a lot of violence. But above all else, it was a place where guys really had a chance to come into their own as characters. Because I like that aspect of the way Paul Heyman ran his company. He was a shitty businessman, but he would see a guy, and if he wasn't really that great in the ring, okay, well, you can compensate for that in other ways. You think 911 was a good wrestler? No. But people bought into he would chokeslam somebody, and people would go nuts. That's what he was good for. Taz. Taz was a short guy. If Taz walked into the WWE locker room at that time, he would have been laughed right out of it. But they came up with this gimmick, this character of him as like this shooter, this tough guy who would tap people out. He would tap out guys twice his size. Al Snow. WWE didn't know what the hell to do with this guy. He came out there, he was a black ninja shinobi. He was Avatar in a different mask. He was Leif Cassidy, who was stuck in a time warp as part of the New Rockers. He went to ECW. He came up with this gimmick where he would walk around with a mannequin head. Somehow it got over. Don't ask me how. And then they brought him back. They said, oh, thanks, Paul. And they took him back, and he was very popular on WWE television, doing the hardcore style, because he's part of the hardcore division at that time. And the hardcore title and the 24/7 hardcore rule, that was some of the most entertaining stuff that WWE did during that Attitude Era period. Where do you think that whole notion of hardcore came from? ECW. So I would say they did more good than harm, because it gave guys a place to work. It gave guys a place where they can hone their craft and hone their character and get noticed and eventually get a better job working for WCW and make more money, or working for Vince McMahon in WWE and becoming a big star like Austin did and Jericho and all those guys and Mysterio. So I think the legacy of ECW will mostly be positive, but you can't ignore the negative. And it's scary when you think of some of those ECW guys, like the really hardcore guys who were most well known for being in ECW. Look at Balls Mahoney. I mean, I saw clips from a Shoot interview that he did recently. Balls Mahoney looks like a 70-year-old elderly man. He's still very smart, and you listen to him speak, and it's amazing that his mind is as much intact as it seems to be. But you look at a guy like that, and you think, okay, well, 10 years from now, is he going to be able to bend over and tie his own shoes? These guys made that choice. I mean, that's the style that a lot of those guys wrestled. And at some point, that's going to catch up with you. Would have been nice for them to take better care of themselves, but then ECW wouldn't have been ECW. Would it have been as popular if these guys weren't going out there beating each other's brains out every single week? I don't know. Maybe not. Those fans could be pretty bloodthirsty at times. I think history will look back kindly on ECW. It was part of the big network launch this week. They made it very clear that you can get old WWF, WCW, and ECW pay-per-views. They included ECW in that same category. So there's going to be a whole new generation of fans now from now on with this network who are going to be exposed to ECW, the original ECW, not the fake version later on. And I think overall, when all is said and done, history will look back kindly on the legacy of ECW. Check this out, guys. For you, the listeners of the Sound Off, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial so that you can check out their service. And it's a quality service. I wouldn't be mentioning it on my show if it wasn't. They have a bunch of wrestling books to choose from in audio form, including Lex Luger's book, Dusty Rhodes' book, Hulk Hogan's book is available with narration from the Hulkster himself. There's even one that chronicles the rise of the late Junkyard Dog in Mid-South, which sounds really interesting. You can choose any one of those free by trying Audible.com. If you commute to work, or if you like listening to things other than music at the gym, I know a lot of people listen to this podcast that way. It seems to me an audiobook would absolutely make sense. To get one, make sure you go to audibletrial.com/Solomonster. It's another way to show your support for the Sound Off, and you get something free in return. Can't beat that. Again, that's audibletrial.com/Solomonster.